When Marcus and Michael Thompson enrolled at the Warriors Path Karate Dojo, they understood the challenges of being among the few African American students in a predominantly Caucasian establishment. However, the severity of what awaited them was beyond their wildest imaginings. From their very first day, Jake Harrison and Connor Mills, two conceited black belt holders, made it their singular objective to demoralize the 14-year-old twins. Yet, when the torment escalated and Jake sneeringly alluded to monkeys mimicking human movements, they crossed a critical line. What these tormentors failed to comprehend was that each night, following their humiliating experiences, the twins dedicated themselves to secret training sessions with their father. The bullies were under the illusion that they were systematically dismantling two defenseless yellow belts. Their miscalculation could not have been more profound. Before we continue, please share your geographical location in the comments below and ensure you subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative is one you will not want to miss. The heavy bag swayed rhythmically under Marcus Thompson's unpracticed strikes, each impact resonating with a dull thud that betrayed his novice status. Beads of perspiration gathered on his brow as he strained to execute the sequence his instructor had demonstrated. A jab, followed by a cross, then a hook. His timing felt disjointed, his stance unsteady. Beside him, his twin brother, Michael, mirrored the same movements, their actions flowing with an innate synchronization that had characterized them since birth. When Marcus shifted his weight, Michael instinctively did the same. When Michael adjusted his guard, Marcus followed suit without conscious thought. "Yellow belts, gather here," called Sensei Robert Mitchell from across the dojo. The 50-year-old instructor moved among his students with practiced authority, his black belt softened by years of dedicated use. "It's time to focus on fundamental stances." The dojo occupied a corner unit within Millbrook's Eastgate shopping plaza, its mirrored walls reflecting the late afternoon sunlight filtering through expansive windows. 20 students filled the space, most clad in white GIs, their colored belts signifying their advancement. The Thompson twins stood out not only as two of only 3 black students in the school, but also as its newest members, having attained their yellow belts a mere 2 weeks prior, following 3 months of foundational white belt training. Marcus and Michael moved to the designated area, their identical movements eliciting subtle glances from their peers. At 14 years of age, they shared the same stature, the same athletic build, honed from their passion for basketball, and the same determined expression that veiled their apprehension within this predominantly white environment. "Horse stance, hold for 1 minute," Sensei Mitchell instructed. The twins assumed the position, their thighs burning as they maintained the wide-legged squat. Around them, more experienced students flowed through advanced katas with a fluid precision that underscored the brothers' newness to martial arts. "Observe the twins," Jake Harrison's voice carried from the other side of the room, where he trained with other black belts. The 17-year-old's tone dripped with an amusement that caused Marcus's shoulders to tense, as if watching two primates attempting to grasp human locomotion. Connor Mills chuckled beside him. "Perhaps they'll learn more effectively if we offer them some bananas." The words struck Marcus like physical blows. His stance wavered, and Michael's faltered in unison, their inherent connection betraying his brother's reaction. Several other students had overheard the remarks, their gazes shifting uncomfortably between the twins and the black belts. Sensei Mitchell, positioned less than 10 feet away, continued his instruction as if undisturbed. "Maintain straight backs, yellow belts. True power originates from a solid foundation." Michael's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Marcus felt his brother's burgeoning anger as if it were his own, their twin bond amplifying every emotion. When one suffered, both did. When one experienced humiliation, the shame doubled. "Time for sparring drills," Sensei Mitchell announced, clapping his hands twice. "Pair up with someone at a similar skill level." Marcus wiped his damp palms on his GI pants and scanned the room for another yellow belt. However, Jake Harrison was already advancing towards them, that same predatory grin plastered on his face. "Fresh meat," Jake declared, his voice pitched for his friend's amusement. "Let's ascertain what these two are truly capable of." "We should pair with other yellow belts," Michael stated softly, his usual analytical approach seeking an escape route. "Don't fret." Connor Mills joined them, his black belt a stark contrast to their yellow ones. "We'll impart some genuine techniques unless you'd prefer to return to whatever you learned on the streets." The casual racism infusing his tone made Marcus's vision momentarily blur with anger. He began to step forward, but Michael's hand clamped onto his arm. Their twin awareness averted a confrontation that would inevitably worsen their situation. "Bow to your partner," Sensei Mitchell instructed from across the room. Marcus found himself facing Connor, while Jake positioned himself opposite Michael. The twins exchanged a swift glance, a wordless communication that had served them since childhood. "Remain composed, stay united, survive this. Light contact only," Sensei Mitchell called out. "This is about technique, not brute force." The sparring commenced, and Marcus immediately understood they were in deep trouble. Connor's initial kick, purportedly pulled at the last second, struck him squarely in the ribs with enough force to expel the air from his lungs. The impact sent him staggering backward, his inexperienced footwork rendering any recovery impossible. "Oops," Connor exclaimed with feigned concern. "I suppose these yellow belts are even more fragile than they appear." On the adjacent mat, Michael was enduring the same treatment. Jake's lightly delivered punches landed with a precision that suggested deliberate targeting. When Michael attempted to counter with one of the basic combinations they had learned, Jake effortlessly deflected it and followed up with a sweep that sent Michael crashing to the mat. "Remain down there," Jake instructed, offering no assistance. "That's where you belong anyway." Michael pushed himself up, embarrassment and fury warring in his expression. Marcus felt the full weight of his brother's humiliation, their connection making the abuse doubly agonizing. The sparring continued for another 10 brutal minutes. Both twins accumulated bruises, while Jake and Connor maintained their charade of instruction, their remarks growing bolder as Sensei Mitchell remained conspicuously focused on other students. "Perhaps your father should have enrolled you in basketball instead," Connor panted, having landed another accidental elbow to Marcus's shoulder. "Stick to what your people excel at." "We are not quitting," Marcus retorted through gritted teeth, tasting the metallic tang of blood from a split lip. "We shall see about that," Jake replied, helping Michael to his feet after another hard takedown with unnecessary roughness. "This dojo upholds standards." As the session finally concluded, the twins gathered their equipment in painful silence. Both walked with a slight limp, their yellow belts a stark reminder of their significant disadvantage. Around them, other students avoided eye contact, the palpable discomfort in the room evident. "Good work today," Sensei Mitchell announced to the class. "Remember, martial arts cultivates character through discipline and respect." The irony was not lost on either twin. As they made their way toward the exit, Marcus observed Jake and Connor conversing quietly near the equipment rack, their voices just audible enough to catch fragmented phrases. "They won't last another month." "Daddy's probably in prison anyway. Should stick to their own kind of places." Michael's step faltered, and Marcus felt his brother's composure unraveling. Before either could react, their father's pickup truck pulled into the parking lot, the familiar rumble of the diesel engine announcing David Thompson's arrival. Outside, they attempted to arrange their faces into neutral expressions, but their identical injuries told a story that would be difficult to conceal. David Thompson disembarked from his truck, his construction-hardened physique moving with the efficiency of a man who had served 8 years in the army before starting his family. His dark eyes immediately catalogued his son's disheveled appearance, the careful manner of their movements, and the forced casualness of their postures. "How was class?" he inquired, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect from subordinates and colleagues for 2 decades. "Fine," both boys replied in perfect unison, their twin synchronization intact, even in their deception. David studied them for a prolonged moment, his gaze lingering on Marcus's split lip and Michael's bruised forearms. "Learn anything useful?" "Yes," Marcus affirmed, sharing a look with his brother that conveyed volumes of unspoken communication. We learned a great deal. 3 weeks elapsed, and the pattern became as predictable as it was painful. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, the twins would arrive at the dojo with renewed determination, only to find themselves systematically broken down by Jake Harrison and Connor Mills. "Partner rotation today," Sensei Mitchell announced during their 6th week of classes. "Advanced students will assist beginners with sparring fundamentals." Marcus felt his stomach plummet as Jake's eyes locked onto his across the room. The predatory smile was becoming as familiar as his own reflection. "Looks like Christmas came early," Connor murmured to Jake, loud enough for several students to overhear. "Fresh targets." The sparring session commenced with what appeared to be legitimate instruction. Jake demonstrated a basic blocking technique to Michael, his movements slow and controlled for the benefit of watching parents in the observation area. "Observe how I position my arm," Jake explained, his voice adopting the patient tone of a dedicated instructor. "Attempt it." Michael mimicked the movement, and Jake nodded approvingly. Then, without warning, his follow-up strike slipped past Michael's guard, connecting squarely with his solar plexus. Michael doubled over, gasping for air. "You dropped your guard," Jake stated with false concern. "In a real confrontation, that hesitation will get you injured." Marcus began to move forward, but Connor intercepted him with a firm grip on his shoulder. "Your brother needs to learn independently unless you believe he is too weak to handle genuine training." The challenge hung in the air. Marcus knew that refusing would mean abandoning Michael, but accepting meant enduring Connor's particular brand of instruction. "I can handle whatever you have to offer," Marcus declared, his voice steadier than he felt. Connor's grin widened. "Excellent. Let's work on combinations." What followed were 20 minutes of systematic abuse disguised as training. Connor's strikes consistently landed with more force than necessary. His corrections were accompanied by shoves and trips that sent Marcus sprawling across the mat. "You're too aggressive," Connor stated after dropping Marcus with a leg sweep. "Your people often believe force resolves everything. However, martial arts emphasizes control." The racial undertone was subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, yet cut deep enough to draw blood. Marcus felt his anger simmering, the familiar fire that Michael always helped him to manage, but his brother was across the mat, grappling with his own torment. Meanwhile, Michael struggled with Jake's increasingly violent demonstrations. Every technique seemed to result in Michael on his back, winded and disoriented. "Perhaps you should consider a different pastime," Jake suggested as he helped Michael up from another punishing throw. "Something more aligned with your natural abilities. Basketball, perhaps running." "I will not quit," Michael responded, his quiet determination earning him another rigorous drill. From his position near the front desk, Sensei Mitchell observed the sessions with apparent satisfaction. When concerned parents inquired about the intensity of the training, he spoke of character development through adversity. Traditional martial arts are not for everyone, he explained to one mother whose son had requested a change of partners. "We maintain elevated standards here." After class, the twins sat in their father's truck, ice packs pressed against various injuries. The silence stretched between them, filled with shared frustration and burgeoning desperation. "Dad will notice eventually," Michael finally stated, adjusting the ice on his bruised ribs. "We tell him we are learning," Marcus replied. "Which is truthful?" "Learning what?" "That we don't belong here." Marcus turned to study his brother's profile. Despite being twins, their reactions to adversity had always differed. Marcus burned hot and fast, while Michael internalized everything until it consumed him from within. "We belong anywhere we desire to be," Marcus asserted firmly. "They do not have the right to dictate that for us." "Tell that to my ribs." 2 days later, David Thompson made an unexpected decision. Instead of dropping the boys off at the dojo entrance, he parked and accompanied them inside, claiming he wished to observe a class. The twins exchanged nervous glances as their father settled into the small seating area designated for parents. David's presence immediately altered the atmosphere. His military bearing and evident protectiveness created a buffer the boys had not experienced in weeks. "Mr. Thompson," Sensei Mitchell approached with professional courtesy, "it is pleasing to see a parent taking an interest in their children's training." "I am always interested in my boys' education," David replied, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp as they surveyed the room. That evening's class proceeded differently. Jake and Connor maintained their roles as senior students, but their comments became more subtle, their physical contact more carefully regulated. The racial undertones persisted, but delivered with surgical precision designed to evade detection by adult observers. "Good effort today," Jake told Michael after a particularly brutal grappling session. "You are truly improving. Your father must be proud of how well you're adapting to our environment." The word adapting carried an unmistakable implication, but delivered with such apparent sincerity that David, observing from across the room, perceived nothing but encouragement. Connor employed similar tactics with Marcus, offering praise laced with condescension. "You are becoming better at following instructions. It is gratifying to witness you learning your place within the hierarchy." After class, David spoke briefly with Sensei Mitchell regarding the boys' progress. "They are dedicated students," the instructor stated, "possessing natural athleticism, but they need to comprehend that martial arts encompass more than physical prowess. It involves integrating into a structured environment." "They are good boys," David responded. "They have been raised to respect authority and to work diligently. I can see that with appropriate guidance, they will find their proper level here." The phrase "proper level" resonated with subtle implications that sailed past David's awareness, but struck both twins like physical blows. During the drive home, David expressed satisfaction with what he had observed. "It appears you boys are receiving excellent training in there." "That Mitchell fellow runs a tight ship." "Yes, sir," both boys replied, their synchronized response masking the bitter irony of their father's approval. Those older students seem helpful as well. It is good to see experienced youths taking newcomers under their wing. Marcus stared out the passenger window, watching familiar streets blur past. His father's interpretation of events felt like living in an alternate reality, one where mentorship replaced torment, where guidance masked systematic humiliation. "They are teaching us a great deal," Michael stated quietly from the back seat. And technically, it was true. They were learning about institutional racism, about how authority figures could enable abuse through willful blindness, about how victims could be isolated even in crowded rooms. "That is precisely what I wish to hear," David declared, pulling into their driveway. "Martial arts builds character, teaches you to confront whatever life presents." As they gathered their gear bags, Marcus caught his brother's eye in the truck's dome light. The same thought passed between them without words. They were confronting what life presented, but not in the manner their father envisioned. That night, lying in their shared bedroom, the twins finally spoke openly about their predicament. "It is not improving," Michael whispered in the darkness. "I am aware." "What if we told Dad the truth?" Marcus considered this. Their father had always instilled in them the importance of fighting their own battles, of never shying away from challenges, and of earning respect through perseverance. How could they articulate that the system itself was rigged against them? He would not believe it, Marcus stated finally. He observed Mitchell tonight, saw Jake and Connor. Everything appeared normal to him. Because they made it appear normal? Precisely. And if we complain, we will seem like quitters, like we are incapable of handling genuine training. Michael remained silent for so long that Marcus presumed he had fallen asleep. Then his brother's voice emerged from the darkness, carrying a resolve that matched Marcus's own burning determination. "Then we become better, strong enough that they can no longer harm us." "How? They are black belts. We have only just earned our yellow belts." "I do not know yet," Michael admitted, "but there must be a way." Outside their window, the suburban street lay peaceful under the streetlights, a tableau of the American dream their parents had worked so assiduously to achieve. Within the room, two 14-year-old boys planned their survival in a conflict their father could not perceive and their instructors refused to acknowledge. The 8th week of classes commenced like all the others, with Marcus and Michael gathering their gear while their father finished his coffee in the kitchen. David had been working overtime on a commercial project, his exhaustion evident in the dark circles beneath his eyes. "You boys will need a ride home tonight," he asked, checking his watch. "I may be able to stop by after my meeting with the electrical contractor." "We can walk," Marcus interjected quickly. The last thing they needed was their father witnessing another session of disguised abuse. "It is getting dark earlier now," David pointed out. "I do not mind picking you up." "Really, Dad?" "It is fine," Michael added. "The fresh air helps us cool down after training." David studied them for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but call if you change your minds." At the dojo, the evening began with basic forms practice. The twins had been honing their techniques at home, utilizing online videos to supplement their limited instruction, and their improvement was noticeable. "Time for partner drills," Sensei Mitchell announced. "Today we are focusing on defensive techniques against multiple assailants." The exercise was intended for advanced students, but somehow the twins found themselves selected as demonstration partners. Jake and Connor volunteered to exhibit proper technique, their eagerness raising red flags that went unnoticed by their instructor. "The key is maintaining mobility," Jake explained to the observing class as he and Connor circled the twins. "When outnumbered, you cannot plant your feet and trade punches." What ensued was a masterclass in sanctioned violence. Under the pretense of demonstrating defensive principles, Jake and Connor subjected the twins to a sustained assault that left them both bloodied and disoriented. "Observe how they are attempting to retreat," Connor called out as he swept Michael's legs, sending him crashing to the mat. "That is precisely what one should not do. Natural instincts do not function in authentic martial arts." Marcus attempted to help his brother rise, but Jake intercepted him with a knee strike that doubled him over. "Focus on your own survival first," Jake instructed the class while grinding Marcus's face into the mat. "You cannot assist your partner if you are on the ground where you belong." The demonstration continued for 15 brutal minutes. Whenever one twin attempted to regain their footing, the other became the focus of the aggression, leaving both disoriented and incapable of mounting any effective defense. "Some individuals simply aren't suited for this level of instruction," Jake remarked, assisting Michael to his feet with a grip that left distinct finger marks on his arm. As the session concluded, the twins collected their equipment with practiced composure. Their bodies ached, their spirits were bruised, but they had endured another class. Outside the training hall, they were surprised to see their father's pickup truck entering the parking area. David's meeting with his contractor had finished ahead of schedule, prompting him to surprise them with a ride home. Through the expansive front windows, he observed Jake and Connor conversing animatedly with other students near the equipment racks. Their words carried clearly through the glass. "Did you see how rapidly they were subdued?" Connor was saying. "As if they'd never encountered a genuine confrontation before. They likely acquired all their knowledge on the streets," Jake responded. "No structure, no skill, just uncontrolled flailing like animals." A chill ran through David as the racial undertones registered. Then his sons emerged from the building. Even in the dim illumination of the parking lot, the severity of their injuries was unmistakable. Marcus's lip was split and swollen, and his GI was torn at the shoulder. Michael moved with the careful gait of someone tending to bruised ribs. David's military background immediately took over. He had witnessed sufficient casualties among soldiers to recognize deliberate harm. "Get in the truck," he said quietly, his voice laced with controlled indignation. At home, beneath the stark kitchen lights, the full extent of their injuries became undeniable. "How long has this been happening?" he inquired. "Dad, it's not like that," Marcus began. "How long?" David repeated, his commanding tone overriding any attempt at evasion. "Since the very beginning," Michael stated softly. "Since our first day." The narrative unfolded. 8 weeks of persistent, cruel mistreatment, all while David had been led to believe it was character building. The instructor was aware of all this, he asked. He was right there, Marcus confirmed. But when you visited, they made everything appear normal. David paced to the window, his reflection revealing a man grappling with decisions that would shape his family's destiny. What are our options? Michael asked. David remained silent for a moment, his mind meticulously evaluating possibilities with military precision. Then he reached a resolution. We give them one opportunity to rectify this. I will speak with Mitchell tomorrow. What if he refuses to listen? Marcus inquired. David's smile lacked any warmth. Then we handle it ourselves. That night, David retrieved a heavy duffel bag and focus mitts from his garage. If the system would not safeguard his sons, he would equip them to defend themselves. The following evening, David entered the dojo with a determined stride. Sensei Mitchell looked up from the reception desk with professional politeness that quickly turned to concern. Mr. Thompson, how may I assist you? We need to discuss my sons and what has been transpiring in your classes. Mitchell's expression remained impassive, but a flicker of something crossed his eyes. Of course. Let us step into my office. As they moved toward the back, Jake and Connor looked up from their warm-up exercises, their expressions shifting from smugness to apprehension. Everything was on the verge of changing. David followed Sensei Mitchell into the small office behind the front desk, his gaze taking in the frame certifications, competition photographs, and motivational posters adorning the walls. The entire space exuded an aura of authority and tradition, precisely the kind of environment where systematic abuse could be concealed beneath a facade of respectability. Please be seated, Mitchell invited, settling behind his desk with the casual assurance of someone accustomed to dealing with concerned parents. What is the nature of your concern? David remained standing, his robust frame, honed by his construction work, filling the confined space with palpable tension. My sons have been subjected to physical assaults in your classes for 2 months, systematically harassed, subjected to racial slurs, and physically abused by your black belt students. Mitchell's expression morphed into one practiced concern. Mr. Thompson, I understand that training can be demanding, particularly for newer students, but what you are describing does not align with the program we implement here. Jake Harrison and Connor Mills have been using my boys as punching bags, David continued, his voice steady yet menacing, under your supervision, in the presence of other students, and you have done nothing to intervene. Those are serious accusations, Mitchell countered, leaning back in his chair. Jake and Connor are exemplary students from well-respected families. They have been training here for years. The emphasis on their respected families did not escape David. Are you suggesting my sons are fabricating this story? I'm suggesting that young individuals sometimes misinterpret firm instruction as harassment. Martial arts training can be challenging, and not everyone possesses the aptitude for it. David's hands clenched into fists. Last night, I overheard those boys referring to my sons as animals, joking about street fighting. Are you going to tell me that constitutes firm instruction? Mitchell's composure faltered slightly. I was unaware of any inappropriate language. If something was said, you were 10 feet away when it occurred. Do not insult my intelligence. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken threats and neglected responsibilities. Mitchell cleared his throat and shuffled some papers on his desk. Perhaps we can find a resolution that is amenable to all parties, he finally offered. The Harrison and Mills families have been significant benefactors to this dojo. Their contributions are instrumental in maintaining our operations and providing scholarships for other students. So, you are protecting them because of their financial support. I am striving to maintain a delicate equilibrium that benefits the entire school community. Your sons are capable young men, but they might thrive in a different setting, something more aligned with their background. David stepped closer to the desk, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more menace than any shout. Their background? You're referring to them being black? I mean, being new to structured training environments. Some students adapt more readily to traditional discipline than others. Traditional discipline? Is that what you call 2 black belts assaulting yellow belts while you observe? Mitchell stood, mirroring David's assertive stance. Mr. Thompson, I've been managing this dojo for 15 years. I understand the distinction between training and abuse. If your sons are struggling with the intensity of our program, they are not struggling. They are being targeted. Then perhaps this institution is not the appropriate choice for them." The words hung in the air like a discarded gauntlet. David scrutinized Mitchell's expression, discerning the calculation behind the man's eyes. This was not a matter of ignorance or oversight, but deliberate complicity disguised as business expediency. "So, that is your proposed solution. My sons depart discreetly, and you continue to accept funds from prejudiced parents to permit their children to torment anyone who deviates from their perceived norms. I am attempting to devise a practical resolution to a challenging circumstance." David turned towards the exit, then paused. "You have until tomorrow evening to rectify this situation. Reassign those boys to different classes. Discipline them publicly. Make it unequivocally clear that harassment ceases immediately, whatever it takes." David's smile was as cold as the Arctic. "Then I will address it in my own manner." Outside the office, the evening class was commencing. Through the doorway, David could observe his sons warming up with fellow students, their movements still hesitant due to the previous night's injuries. Jake and Connor were on the opposite side of the room, their postures relaxed and assured. Meanwhile, within the office, Mitchell sank back into his chair, his mind racing with the implications of David's ultimatum. The Harrison and Mills families constituted over 30% of the dojo's income through monthly fees, private lessons, and equipment purchases. Their departure would necessitate program reductions, staff layoffs, and possibly even closure. However, David Thompson possessed the look of a man who meant every word he uttered. Back at the Thompson residence, the twins were seated at the kitchen table engaged in their homework while their father was at the dojo. Both boys frequently glanced at the clock, their anxiety escalating with each passing minute. "What do you think he's going to say?" Michael inquired, his pencil tapping nervously against his mathematics textbook. "Whatever needs to be said," Marcus responded. Yet his own apprehension was evident in the way he gripped his pen. "What if it makes things worse?" Marcus looked up from his history assignment. "How could they possibly deteriorate further? They are already endeavoring to break us." "They could truly break us or get us expelled. Perhaps that wouldn't be the worst outcome." Michael stared at his brother. Despite their twin connection, Marcus's inclination to sever ties sometimes surprised him. "You wish to quit? I want to be in a place where we are not treated like dirt every single day, but I also want to demonstrate that we belong wherever we choose to be. Those two objectives may not be reconcilable." "Then we shall make them reconcilable." The front door opened, and both boys looked up as their father entered. David's countenance was grim, his military bearing more pronounced than usual. "How did it go?" Marcus asked. David hung his keys on the hook by the door and joined them at the table. "Mitchell is more concerned with his patrons than his students. He essentially admitted he is aware of what is occurring and has no intention of halting it." "So, what is the next step?" Michael asked. David was silent for a moment, observing his sons' faces. These boys had inherited his tenacity and their mother's moral fortitude. They would not retreat from a conflict, particularly one that involved fundamental questions of dignity and respect. Now we prepare for the possibility that discourse will not resolve this predicament. "What does that entail?" Marcus inquired, although something in his father's tone suggested he already grasped the implication. "It means that if the system fails to protect you, I will instruct you on how to safeguard yourselves." "Really? Protect ourselves?" Michael felt a tremor of anticipation mingled with apprehension. "Are you referring to physical confrontation?" "I am referring to survival, to ensuring that no one ever lays hands on you again without facing repercussions." That night, David cleared a section of the garage and hung the heavy bag he had retrieved from storage. The twins watched as their father transformed the ordinary workshop into a space resembling a training facility. "Your mother does not need to be apprised of this for the time being," David stated as he tested the bag's stability. "This remains between us until we ascertain how matters unfold at the dojo." "What precisely will you be instructing us in?" Marcus asked. David's smile was sharp with promise. everything I absorbed during 8 years of military combat training, everything they omit in polished dojos with their quaint regulations. Is that lawful? Michael inquired. Self-defense is always lawful, and after witnessing what has been done to you boys tonight, any action you take to protect yourselves will be deemed justified. The twins exchanged a glance that conveyed volumes of unspoken communication. Their father was offering them something the dojo had never provided: genuine strength, true protection, and sincere respect. "When do we commence?" Marcus asked. "Immediately," David responded, donning a pair of focus mitts. "Because tomorrow night we will discover whether Mitchell upholds his word, and if he does not—" He left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was evident. The period for negotiation was drawing to a close. The era for action was about to begin. The garage felt transformed at 10 o'clock that night, evolving from a utilitarian workspace into an area humming with purpose and potential. David had relocated his truck outside and rearranged tools and equipment to create an open training space. The heavy bag hung from a reinforced beam, swaying gently in the cool evening air. "The initial lesson," David declared, wrapping his hands with cloth strips. "Everything you have acquired at that dojo is engineered to render you predictable. Traditional stances, conventional combinations, rote responses. In a real fight, predictability leads to injury." Marcus and Michael stood side by side, still clad in their school attire, uncertain of what to anticipate from their father's approach to martial arts instruction. "Dad, we are not attempting to harm anyone," Michael stated cautiously. "We merely wish for them to cease their harassment." David's laughter was devoid of humor. "Son, they have been inflicting harm upon you for 2 months. This is not about initiating altercations. It is about concluding them swiftly when they are directed at you." He demonstrated a basic stance that bore no resemblance to what they had learned at the dojo: lower, more agile, with hands positioned for striking rather than deflecting. In the army, we did not have the luxury of elaborate forms or complex techniques. We learned to neutralize threats efficiently and move on. That is precisely what I will teach you. For the subsequent hour, David guided them through drills, emphasizing speed, aggression, and targeting vulnerable areas. There were no ritualized sparring sessions, no held punches, no consideration for competition regulations. "Strike the solar plexus, the throat, the knees," he instructed, holding focus mitts for Marcus to strike. "Do not concern yourself with appearing elegant. Focus on ensuring the opponent is incapacitated." The twins adapted with remarkable speed. Their inherent athleticism and months of foundational training provided a basis upon which David meticulously built with military precision. More significantly, they began to grasp the psychological paradigm shift their father was imparting, from passive victims to assertive defenders. "The next occasion that Connor individual restrains you, Marcus," David advised, "do not attempt to break free from the grip. Utilize it to close the distance and strike him where it matters." "What if we encounter repercussions?" Michael inquired. "For defending yourselves against demonstrably aggressive individuals. Let them attempt to explain that to your mother." Meanwhile, across town, the Harrison family convened around their dining table, discussing their son's progress in martial arts. Richard Harrison, a prosperous insurance executive, took immense pride in Jake's advancement through the belt ranks and his esteemed position as one of the dojo's senior students. "Sensei Mitchell mentioned there might be some challenges with newer students," Richard commented, pausing to take a bite of his food. "Something about cultural differences impacting training dynamics." Jake nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. "There are these twin boys who commenced a few months ago. They are experiencing difficulty adapting to the discipline." "What kind of difficulty?" his mother inquired. "They become frustrated easily. At times, they exhibit a lack of proper deference towards senior students. Mitchell has been working with them, but they may not be a suitable fit for traditional martial arts." Richard frowned. "That is unfortunate. However, not everyone possesses the aptitude for the sort of character development that genuine martial arts provides." "Precisely," Jake agreed. "Some individuals simply are not cut out for it." The conversation continued in a similar vein, with Jake meticulously constructing a narrative that portrayed himself and Connor as patient mentors dealing with recalcitrant students. His parents listened with the satisfaction of individuals whose preconceived notions were being reinforced. Some families understood discipline and respect, while others simply did not. Back in the Thompson garage, the training session intensified. David transitioned from basic strikes to offensive combinations and defensive countermaneuvers. They will attempt to leverage their physical stature and belt rank to intimidate you, he stated, circling the twins with predatory focus. But size is irrelevant when you possess greater speed and a more aggressive approach than they anticipate. He demonstrated a sequence involving rapid encroachment, strikes to multiple targets, and the creation of space for subsequent attacks. The movements were brutally efficient, designed to overwhelm rather than outmaneuver an opponent. This is not about becoming superior martial artists to them, David elucidated. It is about becoming superior combatants. There is a distinction. Marcus executed a combination that landed with a resounding impact on the focus mitts. The force reverberated through the garage. For the first time in months, he felt empowered rather than defenseless. That's it, David encouraged. Now incorporate the knee strike we practiced. Do not grant them an opportunity to recover. Michael's progress was equally striking. His analytical nature aided him in comprehending the strategic principles underlying each technique, while his suppressed anger provided the emotional impetus to execute them with conviction. Remember, David cautioned as they concluded for the evening, this training remains confidential. At the dojo, maintain your usual demeanor. Do not let them discern what you are acquiring here. How long must we continue this charade? Marcus inquired. David's smile was sharp with anticipation. Until the opportune moment presents itself, and rest assured, it will. The following evening at the dojo, the twins resumed their customary routine of enduring harassment and systemic abuse. However, a fundamental alteration had occurred in their demeanor. They still absorbed the blows and tolerated the insults, but their reactions were different, more controlled, more strategic. You are improving at absorbing punishment, Connor observed after a particularly grueling sparring session. Perhaps you are finally comprehending your position here. Marcus met his gaze steadily. We are acquiring a great deal of knowledge. Jake also noted the change. They seem less agitated tonight, he remarked to Connor during a hydration break. Typically, they become more frustrated as the session progresses. Perhaps they are finally conceding, Connor replied. About time. Yet conceding was the furthest thing from the twins' minds. As they endured another night of disguised torment, they were mentally cataloging their tormentors' fighting styles, identifying vulnerabilities, and devising countermeasures they could not yet implement. Sensei Mitchell, meanwhile, found himself increasingly unsettled by the situation. David Thompson's ultimatum weighed heavily on his conscience, but the financial realities of operating the dojo rendered any substantial change seemingly impossible. After class, he discreetly summoned Jake and Connor. I require you gentlemen to exercise utmost caution with the Thompson twins, he stated quietly. Their father lodged some complaints, and I wish to avoid any undue scrutiny of our training methodologies. What sort of complaints? Jake inquired. The standard parental concerns regarding intensity. Nothing significant, but we must be judicious in our approach. Connor's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting we reduce our efforts? I am suggesting a more subtle approach. Ensure that all actions appear to be legitimate training if anyone is observing. The two teenagers exchanged a look that conveyed volumes. They understood the game being played. Maintain the abuse, but enhance the facade. It was a challenge they eagerly embraced. As the twins gathered their gear after class, they sensed the shift in the atmosphere. Their tormentors were adapting, becoming more circumspect but no less committed to their campaign of harassment. They will be more guarded now, Michael observed on their walk home. Excellent, Marcus replied. Guarded implies predictability. And predictability means we can anticipate precisely what they will do. That night's training session in the garage focused on countering specific techniques they had observed Jake and Connor employ. David's military background provided insights into deciphering opponents and exploiting their tactical assumptions. "They anticipate you will fight like yellow belts," he stated, holding a focus mitt while Marcus practiced close-range combinations. "When the moment arrives, you will fight like soldiers." The transformation was remarkable. In merely 2 training sessions, the twins had begun to shed their victim mentality and embrace something far more formidable, the mindset of predators awaiting their opportune moment to strike. 4 weeks of clandestine training had converted the Thompson garage into a laboratory of conflict. The worn leather of the punching bag showed evidence of countless strikes, and the concrete floor bore the scuffs and scrapes from the twins' relentless footwork drills, practiced until their movements became instinctive. "Registration for the tournament wraps up tomorrow," David announced, placing the local martial arts publication, which displayed advertisements for the forthcoming Tri-County Open, onto a nearby table. "Are you two prepared to make a decision?" Marcus swiped the sweat from his brow, his breathing even despite the demanding training they had just concluded. A month under his father's tutelage had sculpted his physique and instilled a newfound assurance in his actions. "We're ready," he responded without a moment's hesitation. Michael, typically more reserved, intently studied the tournament flyer. "Dad, this states there are divisions based on belt rank. We'd be competing against other yellow belts." "Not if you opt for the open division," David replied, his tone carrying an underlying significance that caused both boys to look up sharply. "The open division is open to anyone, regardless of rank," Marcus stated slowly, a realization dawning in his voice. "Including black belts," Michael added. David nodded. "The real question is whether you're prepared to showcase what you've truly learned, not merely to defend yourselves, but to overcome opponents who believe they are superior." The garage fell into a profound silence, broken only by the soft sway of the heavy bag's chains. This was the culmination of all their arduous training. It wasn't just about physical readiness, but a fundamental choice about the individuals they aspired to become. "If we enter this," Michael said carefully, "there's no turning back. Win or lose, everyone will know we're not the same kids who started at that dojo." "Are you the same kids?" David inquired. Marcus flexed his hands, recalling the raw frustration of those initial weeks when every technique faltered and every session concluded in ignominy. "No, we're not." "But what if we lose?" Michael pressed. "What if a month of training isn't sufficient to defeat individuals who have been practicing for years?" David's smile was a fierce testament to his paternal pride. "Sons, they've been practicing karate for years. You've been learning to fight. There's a distinction." Later that evening, the twins found themselves in their shared bedroom, grappling with the ethical complexities of their situation. "This feels wrong," Michael admitted quietly. "All the deception, the clandestine training, the planning for retribution." "What feels wrong is letting them believe they can treat us however they please," Marcus countered. "What feels wrong is a system that shields bullies because their parents can afford to write checks." "But if we injure them at the tournament, if we defend ourselves there, there's a difference." Michael pondered for a moment. "Is there? Dad isn't teaching us self-defense, Marcus. He's training us to be weapons." "Perhaps that's precisely what we need to be. Or perhaps that makes us just like them." The conversation illuminated the core conflict that had simmered throughout their month of clandestine preparation. They had acquired the physical prowess to confront their tormentors, yet the moral quandaries remained unresolved. Meanwhile, in his own room, David stared at the ceiling, wrestling with his own ethical dilemmas. He had dedicated adult life to instilling in his sons values of honor, respect, and problem-solving within established frameworks. Now, he was preparing them to subvert those very frameworks through aggression. Yet the memory of his boys' injuries, the prejudiced remarks overheard through the dojo's windows, the systemic indifference of Sensei Mitchell, didn't all of it justify his current actions? The definitive decision was made during their conversation the following evening in the garage. "The tournament is in 3 weeks, David stated, his gaze sweeping over each of his sons. "If we are to proceed, I need to register you tomorrow. After that, there is no retracting. What precisely are we signing up for? Michael inquired. Just the tournament or everything that follows? David's expression grew somber. Sons, the moment you step into that ring and reveal your true capabilities, everything changes. The dojo, the other students, likely the entire community, you will be making a declaration that cannot be unsaid. Good, Marcus affirmed firmly. I'm tired of remaining silent about who we are and what we can achieve. Michael looked at his brother, recognizing the unwavering determination that had seen them through months of relentless abuse. Despite his reservations, he knew Marcus was right. They had endured being victims, attempted to work within the system, and hoped for natural improvement. None of it had yielded results except for cultivating the strength to demand respect. All right, Michael conceded at last. Let's do it. David nodded, a mixture of pride and apprehension evident in his expression. Then tomorrow, I will register my sons for the Open Division of the Tri-County Open, and we will spend the next 3 weeks ensuring you are prepared for whatever lies ahead. As they commenced their evening training session, all 3 Thompson men understood they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The tournament would transcend mere competition. It would be a reckoning. The Millbrook Community Center vibrated with an electric tension as competitors, their families, and spectators filled the repurposed gymnasium for the Tri-County Open. Banners from various martial arts schools adorned the rafters, and multiple competition rings were meticulously set up across the gleaming floor. The Thompson twins sat in folding chairs near the registration desk, their yellow belts a stark contrast against the backdrop of higher-ranked competitors warming up around them. Thompson, Marcus, and Michael, the tournament coordinator announced, consulting his clipboard. Are you boys certain you want the open division? We have a suitable yellow belt bracket that might be more appropriate. We are certain, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. David stood behind his sons, observing Jake Harrison and Connor Mills as they stretched with their teammates from the Warriors Path dojo. Both teenagers wore their black belts with an air of casual arrogance, their conversation punctuated by laughter as they cast glances toward the Thompson family. Look who decided to grace us with their presence, Connor remarked, his voice loud enough to carry across the warm-up area. This should prove entertaining, Jake added, nodding toward the twins. I almost feel a pang of sympathy for them. Almost. Sensei Mitchell approached the group, his expression a blend of surprise and barely suppressed vexation. Mr. Thompson, I was unaware your sons were competing today. There are many things you're not aware of, David responded calmly. Ring 3, Open Sparring Division, the announcer's voice boomed. First match, Connor Mills versus Michael Thompson. A palpable hush fell over the Warriors Path Dojo section as the unexpected pairing was announced. Several parents exchanged knowing glances, anticipating a swift demonstration of why belt rankings were established. Michael walked to the center of Ring 3, his yellow belt eliciting stares and hushed whispers from the assembled crowd. Connor followed, exuding the confident swagger of someone expecting an effortless victory. Bow to your opponent, the referee instructed. Michael's bow was respectful, yet not deferential. Connor's was perfunctory, almost derisive. Fighters ready? Begin. Connor immediately unleashed a rapid-fire series of attacks, intending to overwhelm his opponent with superior technique and experience. His initial kick whistled through empty air as Michael sidestepped with a fluidity that seemed impossible for a yellow belt. The counterattack was swifter than anyone anticipated. Michael closed the distance with astonishing speed, delivering a sharp blow to Connor's solar plexus that caused him to double over. Before Connor could regain his bearings, Michael followed up with a knee strike that connected with his ribs, expelling the air from his lungs. Point, Thompson, the referee declared. Connor's face turned ashen with shock and mortification. This was inexplicable. Yellow belts did not score points against black belts, especially not with such clinical precision. Connor re-established his stance, his casual arrogance replaced by a desperate, aggressive onslaught. He launched another barrage, throwing wild combinations fueled by panic and embarrassment. Michael absorbed the initial strikes with his guard, then countered with surgical accuracy, a hook to the body, followed by an uppercut that snapped Connor's head back. The black belt stumbled backward, blood trickling from his nose, his eyes wide with disbelief and escalating fury. "Point Thompson! Match Thompson!" Connor stood frozen in the center of the ring, his countenance cycling through disbelief, humiliation, and burning rage. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly as the reality of his defeat fully registered. When the referee raised Michael's hand in victory, Connor's composure finally fractured. "This is impossible," he yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. "He's a yellow belt. This doesn't make any sense." Meanwhile, Marcus was summoned to Ring 2 for his match against Jake Harrison. The older boy's confidence had evaporated, having witnessed his friend's humiliation replaced by barely contained panic. "This won't happen to me," Jake hissed as they faced each other, his voice trembling with desperation. "I've been doing this since I was 8 years old." "Good for you," Marcus responded calmly. The match commenced with Jake employing a frantic aggression, unleashing everything he had learned over years of training. But Marcus had cultivated patience during those weeks of systematic abuse, and he bided his time. When Jake committed to a high kick, Marcus ducked beneath it and drove an elbow into his opponent's exposed ribs. The impact resonated audibly throughout the gymnasium, and Jake's cry of pain carried clearly to the astonished spectators. Before Jake could recover, Marcus seized his off-balance opponent and executed a hip toss, sending the black belt crashing to the mat with a force that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. "Point, Thompson!" Jake struggled to his feet, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down his face. The crowd was now openly abuzz, parents and competitors alike struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. The second exchange was brief and devastating. Jake lunged forward with wild, desperate strikes. Marcus countered with surgical precision, a straight punch to the throat, followed by a sweep that sent Jake tumbling. "Point Thompson! Match Thompson!" Jake lay on the mat for several seconds, his body convulsing with sobs of pure humiliation. When he finally rose, his face was a mask of hatred and wounded pride. The gymnasium erupted in confused murmuring as both Thompson twins stood victorious. The Warriors Path Dojo section erupted into pandemonium. "This is a fraud," Richard Harrison bellowed, storming toward the tournament officials. "Those boys aren't yellow belts, they're sandbaggers." Bill Mills was right behind him, his face a shade of purple with rage. "They've been concealing their true skill level. This is cheating." Sensei Mitchell joined the irate parents, his voice quivering with desperation. "There must have been some sort of mistake. These boys couldn't even defend themselves 2 months ago. Someone has been coaching them illicitly." "They're ringers," Richard declared, jabbing his finger toward the twins. "Professional fighters pretending to be novices. I demand an investigation." The tournament director, a composed man in his 60s, attempted to de-escalate the situation. "Gentlemen, I have reviewed the boys' registrations. They are legitimately ranked yellow belts from your own dojo." "Then they lied about their experience," Bill Mills snarled. "No yellow belt fights like that. It's impossible." Meanwhile, Jake and Connor stood together near their dojo seating area, their humiliation complete and public. Both teenagers fought back tears of rage, their carefully constructed image of superiority shattered before everyone they knew. "This isn't over," Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "They made us look like fools in front of everyone. They cheated somehow," Connor responded, his hands clenched into fists. "Yellow belts don't fight like that. It's not possible." David Thompson approached the agitated parents and officials, his expression dangerously placid. "Is there a problem here?" "Your sons are frauds," Richard Harrison accused, pointing at the twins. "They are not yellow belts. This entire event is a setup." "They earned their yellow belts at your dojo," David replied evenly. 2 months ago, in front of your instructor." "Then someone has been training them illicitly," Bill Mills shouted. "No beginner develops skills like that." David's voice carried a quiet menace. "Perhaps your sons simply aren't as skilled as you believed them to be." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Both fathers recoiled, their faces flushing with renewed anger at the suggestion that their sons, their perfect and superior sons, had been legitimately defeated by children they considered inferior. "We know what we witnessed," Richard snarled. "Those boys deliberately humiliated Jake and Connor, made them look weak and foolish." "Maybe because Jake and Connor are weak and foolish," Marcus said quietly, appearing beside his father. The words struck like lightning. Jake Harrison let out a strangled cry of rage and began to advance toward Marcus, but tournament security quickly intervened. "That's sufficient," the tournament director announced. The matches were fair and legitimate. The results stand. As the twins collected their victory certificates and prepared to depart, the atmosphere remained charged with volatile emotion. The systematic humiliation of Jake Harrison and Connor Mills had forged enemies who would neither forgive nor forget. The Thompson family was making their way toward the exit when Jake and Connor broke away from their parents and approached from behind. Their faces were streaked with tears of rage and humiliation, their movements desperate and uncontrolled. "Hey!" Jake called out, his voice cracking with emotion. Marcus and Michael turned around, still basking in the afterglow of their victories. They saw two defeated bullies approaching, but failed to recognize the dangerous desperation in their eyes. "You think you're so clever?" Connor snarled, closing the distance. "Think you proved something today?" "We proved we're better than you," Marcus replied, his confidence bordering on recklessness. It was precisely the provocation Jake and Connor needed. Their humiliation reached a breaking point, and all pretense of sportsmanship vanished. Connor threw a wild punch at Michael's head, while Jake lunged at Marcus with a vicious tackle. Both twins went down hard, completely caught off guard by the cheap shots. The crowd erupted in shocked screams as Jake and Connor began raining down blows on the fallen boys, their months of pent-up frustration finally exploding into violence. The surprise attacks had blindsided the twins, but their father's training kicked in within seconds. Marcus rolled away from Jake's wild punches and rose into a fighting stance, while Michael absorbed Connor's initial strikes and countered with a devastating uppercut that sent the black belt staggering backward. "You want a real fight?" Marcus snarled, his tournament composure replaced by raw fury. "Let's go." What followed bore no resemblance to the controlled sparring they had just won. This was street fighting, brutal and unforgiving, with months of suppressed rage finally erupting into violence. Marcus landed a combination that split Jake's lip and bloodied his nose, while Michael systematically dismantled Connor with the precise strikes their father had drilled into them during those secret training sessions. "Stop! Stop!" the tournament director shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos as spectators scrambled away from the expanding brawl. Jake attempted to tackle Marcus again, but the twins sidestepped and drove a knee into his opponent's ribs, folding him in half. Connor managed to land a wild haymaker on Michael's shoulder, but the counterpunch that followed sent him crashing into a folding chair. Security guards finally reached the melee, seizing all four fighters and forcibly separating them. Jake and Connor were both bloodied and battered, their black belts torn and stained with their own blood. The twins, though breathing heavily, exhibited significantly less damage despite being ambushed. Their father's training had not only prepared them to win fair fights, but to survive and dominate unfair ones. "We should press charges," Richard Harrison said to his wife, who had arrived with the other parents. "This was clearly premeditated assault against boys who were walking away when your son attacked them." "Good luck with that," David interjected. The Harrison and Mills families huddled together, their voices rising as they attempted to process the complete collapse of their children's martial arts careers. The bands would shadow Jake and Connor throughout their remaining teenage years, effectively extinguishing any competitive aspirations they might have harbored. "This is not over," Richard Harrison stated directly to David as the families began to separate. "Not by a long shot." "It is for your boys," David replied. "They made their choice when they jumped mine from behind." As the Thompson family gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, the gymnasium buzzed with excited conversation about the dramatic turn of events. The tale would quickly circulate within the local martial arts circles within a matter of hours. It spoke of how two individuals holding the rank of yellow belt had not only bested seasoned black belts in a sanctioned contest, but had thoroughly overwhelmed them in the ensuing altercation on the street. "Dad, they appeared quite incensed when we departed," Michael remarked as they proceeded towards the parking area. "Folks generally dislike having their preconceived notions dismantled," David responded, "particularly when those notions revolve around their offspring's inherent superiority." "What do you surmise their next move will be?" Marcus inquired. David remained silent for a brief interval, his military training allowing him to meticulously analyze potential threats and countermeasures. "Likely nothing particularly astute. Individuals consumed by anger seldom arrive at sound conclusions." The journey back to their residence should have been a cause for jubilation. The twin brothers had achieved complete vindication, definitively proving their capabilities in both legitimate competition and physical confrontation. However, a certain disquietude lingered from the parting remarks of the Harrison and Mills families, suggesting that this triumph might carry an uncalculated consequence. Upon their arrival home, the twins attended to their minor abrasions, while David ensured all entry points were secured and the alarm system was activated. One could dismiss it as excessive caution or simply years of hard-won experience, yet an intuition warned him that the encounter at the tournament was merely the prelude. Concurrently, across the expanse of the city, two vehicles laden with irate parents and their crestfallen teenage sons were engaged in a vastly different discussion concerning the day's events. The Harrison and Mills households had spent years cultivating a firm belief in their sons' exceptionalism, their dojo's unparalleled quality, and their own esteemed social standing. All of these convictions had been utterly shattered in a single afternoon by two youngsters they had previously disregarded as insignificant. The logical course of action would have been to accept the defeat and move forward. However, logical responses necessitate rational individuals, and the families convening in the Harrisons' opulent living room were anything but rational. "We cannot permit this situation to stand," Richard Harrison declared, pacing the confines of his lavishly appointed lounge. "Our sons were subjected to extreme humiliation, effectively ostracized, and utterly defeated in plain view of everyone we know." "It's profoundly unjust," Connor mumbled, his words muffled by his swollen lips. "They must have employed some form of illicit tactic. Individuals with yellow belts do not possess such combat prowess." "Precisely," Bill Mills concurred. "There is an inherent wrongness to this entire predicament, something that absolutely requires rectification." As the evening progressed, their collective indignation began to solidify into something far more perilous than mere disappointment. It evolved into a meticulously crafted scheme, a plan that involved tailing the Thompson family to their residence and engaging in a more discreet discourse concerning the concepts of deference and the ramifications of one's actions. By 10 o'clock that night, two automobiles were positioned discreetly at the terminus of Thompson Street, their occupants intently observing the house and formulating their subsequent maneuver. The Thompson residence stood serenely amidst the suburban twilight, its windows emitting a warm, inviting luminescence that bespoke of shared family meals and diligent academic pursuits. David had just completed a final verification of all the locks when the doorbell chimed at precisely 10:47 in the evening. "Who could possibly be calling at this hour?" Lisa Thompson inquired from the kitchen, where she was in the process of concluding the evening's dishwashing. David peered through the front window and observed two gentlemen standing on his porch, bathed in the glow of the exterior illumination. Richard Harrison and Bill Mills, both still attired in the garments they had worn to the tournament, both exuding an aura of barely contained hostility. "Remain indoors," David instructed his wife, his voice resonating with the composed authority that had served him exceptionally well during his military tenure. "Escort the boys to their chamber." "What is amiss?" Lisa questioned, instantly discerning the palpable tension emanating from her husband's posture. "Nothing beyond my capacity to manage." "Just as I have requested." The doorbell rang once more, this time with a more insistent cadence, followed by heavy, resonant knocking that echoed throughout the interior of the dwelling. David opened the door, yet kept the security chain engaged, creating a narrow 4-inch aperture through which he could observe his uninvited guests. "Good evening, gentlemen. Rather late for a social call, wouldn't you agree?" "We require a discussion," Richard Harrison stated, his tone strained with tightly controlled indignation, "regarding the events that transpired today and the actions your sons perpetrated against ours. Your sons initiated an unprovoked assault upon mine, following equitable contests. What remains to be deliberated?" "Open the door, Thompson," Bill Mills demanded, advancing closer to the entrance. "We are not conducting this dialogue through a confined aperture." "In point of fact, we are not engaging in any dialogue whatsoever. It is approaching 11 o'clock. You are present upon my property without invitation and are demonstrably agitated. It is time for you to depart." David initiated the process of closing the door, but Richard Harrison forcefully jammed his shoulder against it, preventing it from fully latching. "Do you possess any comprehension of the substantial financial investment we have allocated to our sons' martial arts training?" Richard snarled through the opening. 7 years of instruction, entry fees for competitions, specialized equipment, intensive training camps, thousands upon thousands of dollars, and your sons irrevocably annihilated it all within the span of a single afternoon. Your financial expenditures yielded you nothing more than entitled delinquents. That is not a concern of mine. Jake was actively being considered by collegiate athletic programs, Bill Mills interjected, his voice escalating with palpable desperation. Full scholarship opportunities were being discussed. Now he faces a lifetime ban from competition until he reaches the age of 18. Perhaps he should have contemplated such repercussions prior to launching a surprise attack upon my son. "Your sons are the ones who deserve to be disqualified," Richard bellowed. "They are imposters, engaging in deceptive practices. Individuals holding yellow belts do not engage in combat in such a manner. My sons attained their victories with integrity and fairness. Your sons earned their prohibitions through their unsportsmanlike conduct and their demonstrably inferior fighting capabilities." The men standing on the porch exchanged knowing glances, their frustration mounting, as David steadfastly refused to yield to intimidation or be drawn into their preferred style of confrontation. "We demand recompense," Bill Mills declared abruptly. "Financial restitution for the detrimental impact your sons have inflicted upon our families." David emitted a harsh, humorless laugh. "Restitution for what? For instilling in your children the understanding that aggressive behavior carries repercussions, for dismantling years of investment, for jeopardizing their futures. Their futures were irrevocably compromised the very instant they elected to target my sons. I merely facilitated the acceleration of that inevitable outcome." "Open this portal," Richard demanded, his patience having finally evaporated. "We shall resolve this matter with appropriate decorum. We are indeed resolving it with the utmost propriety. Propriety dictates that you vacate my property forthwith, lest I be compelled to summon law enforcement." "Summon them," Bill Mills vociferated. "We shall apprise them of your son's illicit training regimen, of how you have systematically transformed them into instruments of destruction." "Proceed. I shall inform them of the sustained racial harassment your son subjected mine to over a period of several months. Let us ascertain which narrative they deem more compelling." David disengaged the security chain and stepped onto the porch, gently closing the door behind him. The two fathers immediately adopted a flanking posture, strategically positioning themselves in what they evidently perceived as an intimidating formation. "You believe yourself formidable due to your military background," Richard sneered. "You surmise that bestows upon you an inherent superiority over us? I harbor no assumptions. I possess certainty. I have cultivated superior offspring compared to your upbringing." "Our sons are champions," Bill Mills protested vehemently. "They dedicated years of effort to attain their esteemed ranks. Your sons are mere brutes who proved incapable of accepting defeat at the hands of individuals they deemed beneath them. All that rigorous training, all that considerable expenditure, and they were still vanquished by individuals holding yellow belts." The assertion struck them like a physical blow, causing both men's faces to flush with renewed fury as the full magnitude of their profound humiliation fully registered. "You have utterly destroyed them," Richard declared, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Years of dedicated effort rendered meaningless. Collegiate opportunities irrevocably lost, all because you were incapable of imparting to your sons the imperative of understanding their rightful place." "Their place?" David's voice carried a deadly, measured calm. "And precisely where, in your estimation, does that occupy?" "You are acutely aware of that location," Bill Mills stated, advancing closer. The underlying racial animus, previously a subtle undercurrent, was now openly and unequivocally apparent. It was ugly and unmistakable. David's military conditioning activated as he rapidly assessed the tactical landscape. Two civilians, clearly overcome by emotion and demonstrably lacking any practical experience in genuine combat. "This is your final opportunity to disengage," David advised calmly. "We are not retreating anywhere," Richard retorted, launching a wild initial blow. David effortlessly sidestepped the errant swing and delivered a precise counterstrike to Richard's solar plexus, causing him to collapse, gasping, onto his knees. Bill Mills surged forward, swinging his limbs with uncontrolled abandon, but David expertly intercepted his wrist and utilized the man's own momentum to hurl him forcefully against the porch railing. "Remain incapacitated," David commanded, yet both men struggled to regain their footing, their wounded pride overriding their physical discomfort. What ensued was a brief, demonstrably one-sided exhibition of the stark disparity between authentic combat training and the impotent fury of suburban entitlement. Richard managed to land a single glancing impact on David's shoulder before succumbing to a rapid sequence of strikes that resulted in a fractured nose and a split lip. Bill Mills fared even worse, finding himself prone on the porch floor with David's knee firmly planted in his back. "Have you had your fill?" David inquired, his breathing somewhat labored, but his command of the situation evident. Both men were too severely battered and exhausted to continue the engagement, yet their animosity burned undiminished. "This is not concluded," Richard gasped, crimson fluid streaming from his fractured nasal bone. "Indeed it is concluded," David responded, releasing Bill Mills and stepping back. "Your sons have been disqualified. Your financial investments have been rendered futile, and now you comprehend the consequences of bringing such matters to my doorstep." The distinct wail of approaching sirens pierced the nighttime atmosphere as multiple police cruisers navigated onto Maple Street. Their oscillating red and blue lights cast an alternating spectral glow upon the surrounding suburban residences. The patrol cars converged upon the Thompson residence, their lights flashing vividly, projecting crimson and azure shadows across the quiet suburban thoroughfare. Officer Martinez, exiting the lead vehicle, her hand resting with practiced nonchalance upon her service weapon, meticulously surveyed the scene. Two individuals exhibiting obvious signs of injury were seated on the porch, while a single individual stood calmly, his hands clearly visible. "A report was received concerning a disturbance," she stated, approaching the assembled individuals with professional caution. "That was I," David affirmed, his voice steady despite the residual surge of adrenaline coursing through his system. "These gentlemen arrived at my property, issuing threats well after 11 o'clock at night. When I requested their departure, they initiated a physical confrontation." "That is an inaccurate depiction of events," Richard Harrison protested, struggling to his feet while applying a tissue to his bloodied nose. "He physically assaulted us. We came here merely to discuss the matter, and he attacked us without provocation." Officer Martinez, possessing an experienced gaze, assessed the tableau before her. David Thompson stood with an air of relaxed alertness, displaying minimal indicators of physical engagement. The other two individuals were patently in a worse state, their injuries consistent with having been on the receiving end of a physical altercation. "Sir, could you please state your name?" she inquired of David. "David Thompson. This is my residence, my private property. These individuals are Richard Harrison and Bill Mills. They arrived uninvited, refused to depart when requested, and subsequently became physically aggressive." "We possess every right to seek an explanation," Bill Mills interjected, his voice thick with palpable pain and resentment. Their sons effectively obliterated our children's futures today. 7 years of dedicated training, substantial financial outlays, all rendered meaningless due to their actions. And what precisely were these actions? Officer Martinez inquired, retrieving her notepad from her person. They launched an assault upon our sons during a martial arts tournament, Richard stated. They physically overpowered them in the presence of hundreds of spectators. David's laughter held no trace of amusement. My sons emerged victorious in legitimate contests against their sons under fair, competitive conditions. Subsequently, their sons attacked mine from behind. Security camera footage will undoubtedly corroborate every detail. Officer Martinez's partner, Officer Johnson, had been engaged in discourse with several neighbors who had emerged from their homes to investigate the commotion. He rejoined the group, bringing with him additional pertinent information. Neighbors have confirmed hearing elevated voices and observed these two individuals approaching the residence in an aggressive manner, he reported. Mrs. Patterson, residing directly across the street, indicated that she witnessed them forcibly pressing against the door when the homeowner attempted to close it. They were trespassing, David stated with measured calm. I requested their departure on multiple occasions. When they refused and resorted to physical aggression, I acted in self-defense. Self-defense? Richard's voice cracked with indignant disbelief. Observe our condition. Observe the extent of his actions. Officer Martinez meticulously examined both injured men, then directed her attention to David's remarkably unblemished appearance. Sir, do you possess any prior experience in military or law enforcement capacities? 8 years in the Army, including 2 combat deployments, David responded. The officer nodded, instantly comprehending the rationale behind the disparity in the physical outcome of the encounter. 2 agitated civilians confronting a professionally trained soldier was an outcome that was inherently predictable. Here is how we shall proceed, Officer Martinez announced with clear authority. Mr. Harrison, Mr. Mills, you will both be issued citations for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Mr. Thompson, you acted entirely within your rights to defend your property and yourself. However, I strongly advise everyone to exercise restraint and de-escalate this situation before it escalates further. Citations? Bill Mills sputtered, his voice laced with disbelief. He perpetrated an assault upon us. You were present on his property at 11 o'clock at night, issuing threats after he expressly requested your departure, she countered. In this jurisdiction, such actions are classified as trespassing and harassment. The fact that you sustained greater injuries in the altercation does not negate the initiating party of the confrontation. Richard Harrison wiped a rivulet of blood from his nose, his face contorted into an expression of profound rage and mortification. Our sons have been disqualified from competition due to the actions of his children. 7 years of dedicated training rendered obsolete, collegiate scholarship opportunities evaporated, and now we are the recipients of citations. Your sons are disqualified because they physically attacked other competitors subsequent to their defeats in matches, Officer Martinez stated unequivocally. That determination rests with the martial arts organization's disciplinary board, not with the legal system, unless, of course, you wish to add the offense of filing a false report to your existing citations. The implicit threat hung palpably in the air as both men apprehended that their evening was only escalating in its unpleasantness. They had arrived seeking a confrontation and validation, but instead encountered only further degradation and adverse legal repercussions. Meanwhile, within the confines of their residence, the twins had been observing the proceedings through their bedroom window, their mother having reluctantly granted them permission to witness the resolution of events they had inadvertently instigated. Dad is all right, Marcus whispered, a palpable sense of relief permeating his voice as they watched their father engage in calm dialogue with the responding officers. More than all right, Michael replied, noting the visibly battered condition of their former tormentors' fathers. It appears those gentlemen have acquired the same vital lesson as their sons. Lisa Thompson stood in the doorway, her professional nursing training in subtle conflict with her protective maternal instincts as she observed her husband expertly manage the aftermath of violence with practiced precision. Your father has always possessed an exceptional aptitude for resolving challenging situations, she commented softly. Outside, the police were diligently completing their official documentation and preparing to secure the scene. The two injured fathers occupied the rear compartments of separate patrol vehicles, their citations being processed while they received rudimentary medical attention for their injuries. Mr. Thompson, Officer Martinez addressed David as the situation began to conclude. You handled yourself commendably this evening. However, I would strongly recommend the installation of security cameras and perhaps a variation in your family's daily routine for a period. Individuals of this disposition can sometimes harbor grudges. That is already in the planning stages, David responded. I appreciate your swift response. Merely fulfilling our duty. And Mr. Thompson, your sons performed admirably today. Occasionally, bullies require a stark reminder that their actions invariably carry consequences. As the police cruisers departed, conveying Richard Harrison and Bill Mills towards booking procedures and citations, David remained on his porch, surveying the tranquil suburban street. The confrontation he had anticipated since the tournament's conclusion had been decisively resolved in his family's favor. The twins emerged from the house, their expressions a mixture of relief and the lingering exhilaration from the night's events. Is it truly over, Dad? Michael inquired. David regarded his sons, both displaying enhanced strength, confidence, and capability compared to their demeanor mere months prior. They had confronted systematic intimidation, triumphed over institutional indifference, and emerged victorious against adversaries who had deemed them inferior. It is concluded, he stated with unwavering conviction. They now comprehend that you are not to be victimized, that our family will not be subjected to undue pressure, and most significantly, they understand that actions invariably yield consequences. Marcus nodded, internalizing the profound lesson their father was imparting. We do not initiate conflict, but we certainly conclude it. Precisely. However, we also refrain from actively seeking out trouble. Tonight's events were a consequence of them bringing trouble directly to us. That is a fundamentally different scenario. As they proceeded indoors, David cast a final glance at his quiet, peaceful neighborhood. Tomorrow would necessitate the filing of official paperwork, the installation of enhanced security measures, and undoubtedly some rather challenging conversations with school administrators and tournament officials. Yet tonight, his family was secure. His sons had internalized the critical importance of assertively defending themselves, and two ostentatious fathers had discovered that their offspring were not the sole recipients of ramifications for their conduct. The lesson was complete, the victory absolute, and the metamorphosis of the Thompson twins from vulnerable targets to triumphant victors was irrevocably finalized. 6 weeks subsequent to the tournament, the Warriors Path dojo stood vacant, save for the solitary figure of Sensei Robert Mitchell, who was methodically packing equipment into cardboard containers with the resigned air of a man witnessing the dissolution of his life's dedication. The official inquiry had been both rapid and exhaustive. The Regional Martial Arts Association had conducted interviews with students, parents, and witnesses from the tournament, thereby constructing a damning indictment of pervasive harassment, tacitly permitted by an instructor who demonstrably prioritized financial contributions over the safety and well-being of his students. Mitchell's instructor certification had been permanently revoked, and the dojo's affiliation with the national organization had been irrevocably suspended. 30 families have terminated their memberships within a fortnight, Mitchell muttered to himself, carefully wrapping his collection of black belts in tissue paper. 15 years dedicated to establishing this institution, all gone. The financial repercussions had been devastating. Without the substantial monthly contributions from the Harrison and Mills families, and with parents withdrawing their children en masse upon learning of the harassment scandal, the dojo proved incapable of meeting its lease obligations. The landlord, while sympathetic, maintained a firm stance. Businesses that generated adverse publicity were not welcomed within his commercial complex. Meanwhile, across town at the newly inaugurated Integrity Martial Arts Academy, the Thompson twins were demonstrating intricate techniques to a cohort of younger students. This new dojo, under the tutelage of a former Marine named Master Chen, had successfully attracted numerous families who had previously been affiliated with Warriors Path before the scandal erupted. Recall, martial arts is fundamentally about safeguarding oneself and others, Marcus explained to an 8-year-old white belt who was struggling to execute a basic defensive maneuver. It is never about inflicting harm upon individuals who are incapable of defending themselves. Precisely, Master Chen added, observing the twins' adeptness in guiding their pupils. These young men fully grasp the essence of true martial arts principles, strength utilized for protection, not for the perpetration of bullying. The twins had exhibited a remarkable trajectory of progress under Master Chen's expert guidance, attaining their orange belts within a mere month of joining the new academy. More significantly, they had firmly established themselves as respected senior students, actively assisting newer members in adapting to the training environment without the pervasive fear of harassment. I overheard that Jake Harrison is now employed at his father's insurance firm, Michael mentioned during a brief respite between training sessions, and Connor Mills is pursuing his education remotely rather than attending Millbrook High. That is for the best, Marcus replied without any discernible malice. Perhaps they will acquire some valuable knowledge. The far-reaching effects of the tournament had extended well beyond the confines of the martial arts community. Richard Harrison's insurance enterprise experienced a significant decline in clientele following the widespread dissemination of information regarding his late-night confrontation at the Thompson residence. Bill Mills was regrettably overlooked for a promotion at his legal firm, his professional standing considerably tarnished by the police citations and associated negative publicity. At Millbrook High School, the narrative of the events had ascended to the status of local legend. The Thompson twins, once perceived as quiet newcomers, were now renowned as the brothers who had effectively dismantled the town's martial arts bullies and exposed the systemic corruption within the area's most established martial arts institution. It feels rather peculiar to be celebrated for engaging in combat, Michael confided to his brother as they ambled home from the new dojo. On the other hand, it's certainly preferable to being known for being physically overpowered, Marcus responded with a discernible grin. At their residence, David Thompson was in the process of installing the final security camera around their property, a precautionary measure that ultimately proved unnecessary as the Harrison and Mills families had withdrawn into a state of embarrassed solitude following their legal entanglements. "How was your training session?" he inquired as the twins entered through the garage. "It was excellent. Master Chen indicated that we might be adequately prepared for our green belt examinations by Christmas," Michael reported. "The twins have been instrumental in guiding 3 newcomers with their fighting methods today," Marcus mentioned. "No one is targeted at our new educational institution." David nodded, a sense of contentment washing over him. The shift was absolute. His sons had evolved from being preyed upon to becoming guardians, employing the hard-won abilities they possessed to ensure other youngsters would not endure the systemic bullying they themselves had suffered. Lisa Thompson emerged from the culinary area, her countenance a blend of maternal pride and persistent apprehension regarding her family's security. "Have you received any updates on the official closing date for the martial arts studio?" "By the end of this month," David responded. "Mitchell has been attempting to divest himself of his equipment, but most establishments are unwilling to associate with anything linked to his methodology." "What about Jake and Connor? Have they secured alternative training facilities?" "It makes no difference," Marcus stated with conviction. "They are barred from any competitive events until they reach the age of 18, and even then, their notoriety will persist." Their discussion was cut short by a rapping at the front entrance, a sound that still elicited a sense of vigilant caution within the Thompson residence. However, this visitor was anticipated and warmly received. Master Chen stood on the stoop, holding a manila folder and sporting a smile that conveyed promising tidings. "I wish to present these to you personally," he remarked, extending the folder to David. These are the official commendations for Marcus and Michael's progression to Orange Belt, along with a special edition. Within the folder were the belt certifications and endorsement letters for a youth empowerment initiative administered by the state's martial arts governing body. They are interested in the boys assisting in instructing coaches on anti-harassment strategies, Master Chen elaborated. Evidently, their personal narrative has garnered attention at the state level. Other dojos are keen to learn how to prevent occurrences similar to what transpired at Warriors Path. The twins exchanged knowing glances, their unspoken connection as profound as ever. Following months of being singled out as targets, they were now being invited to contribute to shielding others from comparable ordeals. "We would be profoundly honored," Michael affirmed, speaking for both of them. As Master Chen departed and the family resumed their evening activities, the metamorphosis that had commenced in a humble garage with a punching bag and focus pads reached its logical culmination. The Thompson twins had not merely mastered the art of self-defense, they had ascended to the role of mentors, serving as exemplars of how those who have been victimized can transform into protectors through sheer perseverance and appropriate instruction. "Are you boys content with your achievements?" David inquired as they convened for their evening meal. "We are proud that we persevered," Marcus replied. "We are proud that we demonstrated our rightful place wherever we choose to be," Michael added. "And we are proud that we can assist other children in sidestepping the hardships we endured," they concluded in unison, their twin telepathy remarkably intact despite the significant alterations in their lives. Outside, Millbrook continued its tranquil suburban rhythm, yet the power dynamics that had once seemed immutable and fixed had been entirely redefined. The tormentors had been exposed and vanquished. The unscrupulous instructor had lost everything, and two young individuals who were once perceived as easy targets now stood as respected leaders within their community. Occasionally, justice is a protracted process, unfolding through legal proceedings, committee reviews, and official channels. However, at other times, it arrives with haste, delivered by those who resolutely refuse to concede that dominance is the exclusive domain of those who wield it unjustly. The Thompson twins had absorbed both these crucial lessons deeply, and they would carry them forward throughout their lives. I trust you found this narrative engaging. Kindly offer a like to the video and subscribe to ensure you do not miss future installments. In the interim, I have thoughtfully selected 2 additional stories for your viewing pleasure, which I believe you will find most enjoyable. Have a most wonderful day.